Hello, this is Gail Ferris, your narrator, and I'm going to take you on a trip. This was my second trip to Upernavik, Greenland. I flew from New Haven to Ottawa via First Air and then up through to Sunnerström Fjord. From Sunnerström Fjord, I flew up to Jakobshavn, Ilulissat. From Ilulissat, I flew via helicopter here in Upernavik. July 4th, 1993. And it's quite nice. We have a little ice here and there, but not like last year. 1992. We're in Laksefjord. And just to show you what I'm passing by, there is an interesting mixture of rocks of different types. Looking at a granitic type of rock here. On the opposite side, something different. I am passing along, going eastward. Behind me is a consistent northwest wind the last 3 days, which is helping me down the fjord. Here, as I am paddling down into Laksefjord, the water is first turquoise, and then it is gradually turning more and more powdery white due to all of the rock flour that is being fed into this fjord from the glacier at its base. This color, I haven't seen this before, quite this color in water. The tide is receding, so I'm paddling close to these rocks because otherwise I would have to work against the tide, and it makes a lot of unnecessary effort. We have had mixed clouds today, yesterday, and the day before it was raining back and forth, clearing for a moment and then raining once again. But right now, barometric pressure is quite high. The sun is out very nicely. I'm showing you a close-up of these rocks as I am gliding by this magnificent granite. And what really fascinates me is how in among these rocks are hanging gardens, little clumps of dirt that have plants just filling them solidly as I am gliding by in my kayak. Here and there, everywhere that the wind cannot scour the soil away, are these complex little terraces just festooned with whatever can establish itself. And the dirt is very rich, as you can see, because it's really filled with plants, each one of these little hanging gardens. Absolutely fascinating to see. I'm making my way up the fjord toward its headwaters. And the interesting thing I'm starting to notice is the water is becoming quite chalky. That's typical of water coming down from a glacier, and the salinity is dropping. Things are getting interesting because it's quite a bit narrower here. It's becoming an interesting little passage here, really. Just never know what you're going to see when you're visiting places like this. It's really quite pretty over here, this rock dome. Oh, it's about 7 o'clock in the evening right now. The wind has been pushing me along. We have these clouds up here that are giving us, about 10 to 15 knots of wind coming sort of out of the north. So here and there, you wind up getting really pushed through the little narrow passages with with a nice free ride on the waves. The water is surprisingly chalky. see, it's really very gray. The sky is an interesting mix of cumulocirrus and stratocirrus clouds, very high ones coming in, and contrasting angles with altostratus clouds, altostratus. Up above are gulls. I'm getting quite near to a rookery for glaucous gulls, which is why they are flying over above me and are quite alarmed. I have been told that way down in the lower portions of fjords it's possible to find rookeries for ivory gulls. Ivory gulls prefer very isolated rookery situations. Here's some gull chicks. These gull chicks are doing what all gull chicks do. They pretend they're not there. Coming around the end of this island. It's quite interesting. I am 3/4 of the way, or about 20 miles down in the fjord. Well, this morning we are in the far reaches of the fjord I've been paddling down the last couple of days, called Laksefjord. In this area, it is a microclimate. It's much warmer than the outside. Because it's much warmer, this morning we have quite a big population of mosquitoes. However, DET bug repellent works very well for these critters. So I'm having breakfast outside to make life a little more comfortable, because the interior of my tent seems to have a few visitors inside. And so I thought I might have breakfast out, because it's a little annoying to have to deal with so many of these little guys. So returning to the outside, we're having the coffee first, and then we're having our assorted goodies, which is ham and eggs, oatmeal, and tang, and in the thermos bottle is lunch for later. All the food on this trip has been prepared during the winter months by either dehydration or freeze drying. And then it was ground to powder in a blender, and it fits in little pockets very conveniently. The solar battery regenerator over here is working. It's charging up one of my batteries. At long last I found fern, because where we are is a glacial refugia at 72 degrees north. But we're in Laksefjord, which is an interesting, unique microclimate. And they like to grow in these very protected little regions in the rocks. In this same region, there are willow trees that are now showing 2.5 feet in height. Interesting area. Birch grows here profusely, but it doesn't grow quite that tall. This is the tallest birch. It's approaching 3 feet actually, right here. So you can see how things grow quite well in these protected areas. I have arrived at this point, which is the site of the forest of trees, willows, and I don't know what else. They're reported to be at 2 meters high. And from this point, it looks like that may be possible. It's an interesting area with a sort of basaltic backdrop, kind of trap rock type of rock up there, which appears to me to be possibly a source of nutrients to these trees down here because there's a water coming down from there, and it seems to collect right in this little delta here, where all these trees have great size. It's quite unusual. Right now I'm in the forest, and I'm standing next to a tree that's about 2 meters, and it's a long way to go to get some shade, I must say. I've been paddling for 4 days since I left Upernavik. This picture shows for proportion the video camera with the basaltic mountain behind. Next is a picture of myself in my Ruka vinyl dry suit, and it was really hot down there. I only stayed for half an hour. I couldn't stand it. It was so hot. Here's a close-up of the 3-foot-high birch trees that were growing to the outside of the delta, which was filled with all of the salix trees. I was quite curious about why there was such a heavy layer of humus or peat material in this area, and why these plants could grow so large. I felt that they must be heavily enriched by the rock strata above them. The purpose of this picture is to illustrate beneath the birch how black and rich the soil is, even though it has been washed out by high storm surge waves. This is a red willow, the Salix arctica, and this is one of the 2 willows which has grown to 6 feet tall or 2 meters in this delta area. Here is the other willow, Salix glauca, or white willow, that also grows to 2 meters tall. It's fun to look at these close up. The major difference between these 2 willows is in the appearance of the catkins. Among the bases of these willow trees were large lichens, and their thalluses were 2 and 3 inches across in diameter. Growing among them were flowering vascular plants, quite a contrast to the lichens. Because the physical portions of these plants is so much smaller than the sheer mass of these lichens. In the middle of this picture is a tiny stellaria, and around it is a polygonium. Next is a cerastrum. Now is a cochlearia, which is in the mustard family and is edible. It's a fleshy plant. Here is a very small version of a ranuncula, a member of the buttercup family, which likes moist ground. This is bladder campion, which is also common in New England in a larger form. Here we are at the willow forest. Warm air is coming down here because of the configuration of the land. And this was the forest that we were just visiting a minute ago. What is happening with our prevailing wind coming actually from over here is that the wind gets a lot of warmth from the peaks in this fjord. So by the time it gets here, it's gained quite a few, just a little bit of warmth. That helps to maintain this forest of trees here. And I think that's also one of the factors. The dark rocks in the area. And I think these are the source of nutrients. And in the foreground is some gooky clay, which I walked in. And some of these rocks are a little bit flinty. I saw some very filamentous green algae in the water, fresh water coming down into this delta, which implies alkaline soil. It is interesting that once you're out of the delta, off to the side here, the dominant species of tree looks to me like it's birch. There's more birches here. There's absolutely none in that delta of willows. The height of these birch are not particularly unusual. Maybe a couple feet high, but that's about it. Anything in comparison to the willows that we just saw that were 2 meters high in some cases. It was so miserably hot down there and loaded with mosquitoes. I had to hightail it out of there. I just couldn't stand it anymore. And all of the distance I paddled out of the fjord, the wind was in my face the entire way, about 10 to 15 knots. It was a gruesome ordeal, and I just kept paddling until I got farther out away from those gruesome mosquitoes and all that heat. Paddling back out of the fjord, I was paddling against the wind, and I paddled on the west side of the fjord, which was much more interesting, actually, than the east side that I'd come down on. Here is my klepper pulled up above the high tide line at rest on the rock. I reused this exact same campsite in 2003 when I made the same journey. Now it is 11 o'clock in the evening, and I've just gotten off the water. This is the scene from my campsite this evening. And doesn't this suggest a Japanese woodcut? This is part of the elegance of travel in these areas. And tomorrow morning the sun will be coming at me, probably from over here. Now, after a splendid day, I am about to have dinner and rest. So this is the panorama that I have this evening. The sun makes its dark moments by ducking behind mountains, but it doesn't actually set until mid-August in this area. When I last spoke to you, it was close to midnight. Now it is about 7 in the morning. The sun has moved here. So when I get on the water, it will be behind me for a while. If you look at the sky, change is on the way. Although my barometer says not. At my feet is a structure painting of a Greenlander's home. A sod house. Which would be not visible from the water at this time because it's just a simple mound, but going for a short walk, here I am, and I found this structure. It's a combination of sod and stone, and much of it has just simply slid apart, so that the walls are remaining are only a couple feet high, but it's definitely the remains of a home. This is a little further back, looking at the back side of it. And this is from above. Across the way there are 1,000 and 2,000 foot peaks which cast shadow at this time of day. This is a good viewpoint for a hunter because you have a nice view in 3 directions up and down Laksefjord. I'm looking out slightly to the east on a diagonal toward Amaratelik Island. This is a view looking straight across toward Amaratelik Island and Kuliarsik Islands. This is directly across but slightly west, and it's called Pukata. Pukata Mountain is just in view, and the campsite is right directly in the middle where I camped. Now, that tallest and farthest mountain is the very in my face. A little bit less than was in Laksefjord, but still it's the same wind that comes across through from the ice cap of cold, dense air replacing warm air in the lower fjords. I discover a wonderful trick, and that is to paddle in the wind shadows. In other words, where the water is flatter, there is hardly any wind, and that makes it much easier for paddling through. I emerge at the end of the passage and head for the nearest island, which is Umanak, and there I find some eider ducks are nesting, which is fun to see. I am now in sight of Sword Hole. This is quite a famous entrance in the far north. It's called Sword Hole, Black Hole in English. And right now we have a little tide against wind, which makes paddling a little bouncier. Thousands of birds, especially auks, come and nest here every summer, and Knut Rasmussen lost one of his expedition boats in this very area. The pyramid-shaped peak in the middle is Sanderson's Hope, which is quite near Upernavik. I'm heading for those bright pink cliffs on the other side. They really are as pink as they look in this picture. They're about 6 or 7 miles away. This is Long Island, its westward flank, and it's the last island before Upernavik. I am standing on the coast of Upernavik once again. It took me a week to paddle to and from Laksefjord.